TIFU, had a quick-witted, funny response in class and was asked to leave. This happened whilst at uni in the UK. I studied English, and eventually got my degree at a high level, so must have been doing something right, when we were in a seminar discussing the book that we had to have read that week. I'm not sure which book, I certainly hadn't read it, but there was an element to the book that apparently touched on prostitution. The seminar discussion then turned onto the related topic of local prostitution, and the fact that in the street adjacent to our campus used to be a notorious red light district. Whether it was related to the book exactly or not, the female for context professor asked the class, "Can anyone think of a reason why there could have been a sudden change and that one moment there was prostitution here and then the next there was not?" I knew that the responses she was looking for was related to police action, law changes, economic changes in the local community, gentrification of the area, etc. Certainly I recall thinking that these would have been acceptable responses. But I fucked up and said something else entirely. So, as the first person to put my hand up in a class where I was the only male out of a dozen or so students, I said, "Perhaps they all just graduated and moved away." The laugh that I was so hoping for absolutely did not appear. Instead I had every single person in my class giving me a look of disgust, and my professor suggested that if I can't take the subject matter seriously, I should leave. So, yeah, I left embarrassed and a little shell-shocked if I'm honest. Really have to read the room a bit more when making public jokes, that's for sure. TLDR, I made a joke in my uni class full of girls that suggested the reason why a local red light district suddenly didn't have any prostitutes anymore was that they must have been students and they graduated and moved away. I was asked to leave the class. I was taking an English class in CC for an GE Rec and we were reading this stupid book called Drown. There's a story where this guy, Edgar or something, is getting bullied by other kids and one of them chuck a Coke bottle at his face, glass kind. And he ends up disfigured and he starts wearing a bag on his head. Anyhow, the story goes on about this guy's life-sucking ass and we had to analyze it in class the next day. Professor eventually asks the class, as part of our discussion, what are some things Edgar may want to avoid in his future? And before I could stop myself I blurt out Coke bottles edit. For those asking, the book is Drown by Junit Diaz, and I got some of the details wrong. It was 8 years ago and I definitely coasted on required reading, haha. Only tangentially related, and many years ago. I was in I think 8th grade music class. The teacher was asking about strings, such as what sound would a long thick string make, what sound would a short fat string make. In that moment it just came out of my mouth like it had a mind of its own. What about if it's long and hard? I got the laugh but was sent to the principal's office. It was probably inappropriate in this situation but I had a good laugh, so take this gold. And congrats for the high-level degree. Senior year of college I took a speech debate class. Before classes students are filtering in, the teacher, who was the college debate coach, was giving me shit because I wore my mock trial shirt to class. We had the following exchange. Him. You know the mock trial team has never even made it past regionals, right? Me. Not yet, but we will. Him. Why do you even want to go to law school and be a lawyer? Me. Well, we can't all go to speech teacher college, can we? I got a good laugh from the class, and a bad grade. Absolutely zero regrets. I had an interpersonal communication class that was 90% women. Each week, we would go around and say what's happening in our lives as a warm-up. I decided to tell the story about how I had, and do not get ahead of me here, punched my wife in the face. Got the scowls I expected because I opened it with, I punched my wife in the face this morning. Literal death glares. What actually happened was, it was early morning, we were in bed, and I was sleeping on my side facing my wife. She rolled over, which has tired me just enough that my eyes opened a fraction and I could see her face. What was not accounted for was that I was dreaming about a demon, and when my eyes opened, it overlaid the demon face on my wife's face, and my animal brain went, demon, and made my arm throw a jab. My wife laid there for a second, then went, ow. I asked her what happened, and she said I punched her. I said sorry and promptly fell asleep. Luckily, I have bad form in my sleep, and it turns out I just poked her in the closed eye with my thumb. Classmates forgave me, too. I had something similar happen. In grade 11 world history, the teacher would almost lecture like a university professor, which made the class easier to get through as a stoned teenager. This particular day, he was talking about fact versus opinion. He asked a student to state a fact. The student said, "You didn't shave this morning." The teacher had a beard. Without a second to think through my thoughts, I blurted out he didn't shave his face this morning. I did get the laughter and was then asked to step outside. Worth it. I had something like this happen one time. I was a sophomore in college and came to class on time, but only just. The only empty seats were in the middle of a very crowded row of stadium-like seating. There were maybe 125 students crammed into this particular lecture. As I was making my way to my seat, the professor made a comment on my appearance along the lines of, "You're a little overdressed for class. Don't you think?" This was like 2005. And, being from Oregon, I was peak lumberjack hipster before it was a thing. I was wearing two-tone brown saddle shoes with bright red soles, a red plaid cowboy shirt with pearl snap buttons. My wife, who I was dating on the time, really liked that shirt, a brown corduroy blazer with brown leather elbow patches. All of this was thrifted. And tight high-water skinny jeans. I stuck out like a sore thumb at my university but was comfortable with my appearance and myself. Maybe a little too comfortable, because, before I could stop myself, I fired back to this kind but somewhat sloppily dressed biology professor. Well, I figured at least one of us should look good. The air instantly left the room to the sound of gasps and people whispering, "Oh." It was a savage and not really deserved burn. I felt bad, and immediately apologized, but I deserved the B+ I got in that class. Look at this fucking hipster, claiming he was a lumberjack hipster before that particular variant of hipster was a thing. Yeah, suggesting your classmates are prostitutes isn't good. Strictly speaking, I was suggesting that a previous year's students were prostitutes, but effect was essentially the same. I'm sure you meant well, and this probably won't be well received on Reddit. But in higher education, women often aren't taken seriously and are taken for granted, so I understand why this joke just didn't hit right. I don't think sex workers should be ashamed of their line of work, but making a joke that your classmates, or a previous cohort, are prostitutes is just kinda icky. Yeah, everyone is coddling up, telling him how funny it is, but it's really pretty cringy. I have nothing against crude humor, but the context is important. Also, students resorting to sex work to survive is a huge issue at the moment. Yeah, and of course people in the comments will just say that they should have laughed, etc., because most of them aren't the butt of the joke. And, you know, it was literally in a college class. Just answer the question instead of giving a cringy joke answer. The teacher's previous students were prostitutes is probably what the teacher heard. Personally, I think your answer was fucking hilarious and you should be proud. That moment, in that classroom, was an incredible opportunity. I'd say once in a lifetime. Well done. Oh yes, making a shitty joke at the expense of your classmates is definitely something to be proud of. An achievement of a lifetime. I hope your advanced degree included reading the Room 101.